All right, this is Aaron Murakami with A&P Electronic Media. We have all of our books, over 200 something books and videos on a wide range of different topics from energy technologies to the real Tesla science and a massive amount of Eric Dollard's published work. He's on the call with us today. This is kind of a spontaneous call that we're doing because 2 weeks ago or so, I'm doing some updates on the server with Simon Davies, and I realized that one of the um, excerpts or promo kind of preview videos for Steve McGreevy's presentation, I'll just go there right now. This is basically the preview video that was on Steve McGreevy's page, Natural VLF Radio presentation that he gave. I think it was in 2015, because that was the one conference we did at the Eagles Lodge downtown Coeur d'Alene rather than up in Hayden. In doing some recent updates on the server, we realized that this particular video was actually made private. And I don't know how long ago it was made private, but for a long time, or however long, nobody was able to see it. So I made it live. Eric saw it, thought it was brand new, and but there was some people who were commenting on it from about 2 weeks ago, and even though there was 2,400 views on it, some of that came from 2 weeks ago. But Eric wanted to do a Zoom call here to kind of explain what's going on here, because it's highly relevant to some of the seismic forecasting stuff and the earth signals that we want to put on the air. And the last Zoom call that came out, a few weeks back, um, is directly related to this. So there's an issue with playing audio from videos through the Zoom call. So I might take this video out and put it into the YouTube video that I eventually put out for this Zoom call. But this is a preview video for Steve McGreevy's presentation on the art of natural VLF field recording. And this goes into a lot of the sounds that he captured over the years with his uh, listening devices that used to be available on his website, which I'm just going to show that real quick. Right now, his website is taken down, but it was auroralchorus.com. You can see the name of that in that banner there, or you can see it up here in the header. The website's not there, but you can go to archive.org. That's the Internet Archive, the so-called Wayback Machine. And if you type in auroralchorus.com, you can go and at least see McGreevy's page. This is an example of one of his devices that has one of these flexible antennas you screw onto that BNC jack on top. You can put on some headphones, and as long as you're, say about a mile or more away from any kind of power lines, you can hear all these interesting, amazing sounds coming right out of nature. And so, do you want to start commenting on anything, Eric, or do you want me to mention these other presentations first and the scope shot
No,
that
just
you're?
just just go through all the presentations.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another presentation, this came out, looks like about the same year, maybe 2019. This is called Electrodynamic Seismic Forecasting. And this goes through a little bit more sophisticated, well, a lot more sophisticated version of kind of what Steve McGreevy is doing. And this is moving in the direction of a full-blown, seismic forecasting method, but Eric is using more simplified equipment compared to the whole system that was at Landers, California. You can go to emediapress.com. Same with McGreevy's presentation. You go to emediapress.com. At the top right is a search box, and you can just type in the word natural, and this presentation will come up. You can go to the same website, emediapress.com. In the product search bar, you can type in electrodynamic, hit return, and this presentation will come up. You can get a discount if you also want to get the musical seismograph, which is a very, very comprehensive overview of this whole methodology, including a novel amplifier that Eric built to amplify, these real minute little tiny signals and amplify them up to where we can, either see them on a scope or listen to them. The musical seismograph is composed of multiple parts throughout the presentation. We're in the process of updating some of the presentations, so eventually that'll be updated. But these presentations all tie together. I would recommend just getting the combo, which is electrodynamic seismic forecasting, and you can click the box and add musical seismograph to it, and you can get a good discount on that. And then on each of the pages, for example, electrodynamic seismic forecasting, you can scroll down and here's an 11-minute video, which is a preview video of his presentation. And if you forward to about 9.5 minutes, Eric will start talking about a shot from the oscilloscope showing these some of these similar type of waveforms that go to this audio. And so if you're interested in that, you can listen to that first before buying the presentation. And so going to just go from there, Eric, or you want me to point anything?
So basically, the reason why what I'm doing right now came to mind is when I saw the Steve McGreevy's recording, I figured, well, there's a lot of explanations that are in order here. So what Steve McGreevy had done was he has these portable devices with very small antennas that are not really capable of getting an in-depth signal reception. So he has to go to the places that the signals originate. So what he had done in that recording is he went way up into Canada, into the northern latitudes, and got right underneath an active aurora borealis display, and the signals came in loud and clear, and evidently they're quite stunning. But this is just one of a very large variety of Earth signals, and that's what I want to kind of cover. And then there's a problem in that this stuff is advertised as VLF, which stands for very low frequency, but it's not VLF. And I'll have to get into that. It's actually ultra low frequency. So basically, the overview here is how to intercept the Earth signals and what are they. So there's quite a variety of them. So I'll kind of get into an outline. This is probably one of the primary EPD laboratories' efforts is this Earth signal reception in its broadest possible manifestation. This is not a ham radio effort by any means. Ham radio efforts are haphazard, furtive, but cheap. This operation is more of a United States Navy effort, which is very thorough, reliable, and unfortunately very expensive, as indicated by the fact that roughly $300,000 has been spent so far to get the facilities and the materials that are presently available, and outstanding quantity of money that's needed very shortly is $13,000 for the communications line in the town and $15,000 for the utility power connection to the terminal facility at the seismograph mine. So this VLF and ULF and all these things, I'm going to kind of give a technical description here. So it starts off with what's called ELF, or extremely low frequency. This is where your seismograph variations, the seismic waves, that kind of stuff, the things that are referred to as the Schumann resonance, which is somewhat erroneous. All of these things are in the extremely low frequency range, which is from DC to 30 cycles a second. So if we convert that to wavelengths, the wavelength there for zero is, of course, infinite. So there is no wavelength. So we're talking about fields that would extend throughout the entire universe. And at 30 cycles per second, the wavelength is 10,000 kilometers. So again, we're dealing with astronomical wavelengths. So we're dealing with phenomenon here that from a wavelength standpoint are enormous, and consequently, it's not something you're really going to get with a 6-inch whip antenna or a coil of wire with 20 or 30 turns on it. So above extremely low frequency is super low frequency, and that operates from 30 cycles a second to 300 cycles per second. The wavelengths, again, are enormous. For 30 cycles a second, as was indicated, 10,000 kilometers. For 300 cycles a second, it's 1,000 kilometers. Now, this range is useful for Earth signal reception just below the power line interference levels, which start to become very difficult to deal with, up into those power line interference levels. Again, the wavelengths are enormous, so small antennae are not really capable of picking up with any great degree of ability, and so reception is limited by normal means. Okay, then above super low frequency is ultra low frequency. That's from 300 cycles per second to 3,000 cycles per second, and that's known as the voice frequency band. In other words, that's the frequency that your telephone receiver operates at. And these are the frequencies that Steve McGreevy has been focusing on, as well as facilities at Landers and things that are going on here. So the wavelengths there are 1,000 kilometers to 100 kilometers. So again, these are enormous wavelengths, and that's part of the reason why we're using these very long wire telephone facilities. Then very low frequency, or VLF, is 3 kilocycles to 30 kilocycles. So that's a wavelength ranging from 100 kilometers to 10 kilometers. These frequencies are typically used for submarine communications and also high fidelity audio frequencies extend into this band. So basically, high fidelity audio spans super low frequency to very low frequency. And then above that is the low frequency band, which is 30 kilocycles per second to 300 kilocycles per second. The wavelengths then from 10 kilometers to 1 kilometer. So basically, the frequency span between 0 cycles per second or direct current and 300 kilocycles per second is the Earth signal bandwidth. Now, the Earth signals are not confined to any one of these particular bands. They have harmonics and transients and composite waveforms that encompass this entire range of frequencies. So that kind of gives you an indication of your amplification and reception and what have you is going to be rather involved. So going from there, so this terminology thing is very problematic because people are going to persist on using VLF, just like people are going to persist on using daylight savings time and calling noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And of course, the biggest tragedy of all is now Nikola Tesla is now just Tesla, which is the realm of the political lizard pit. And the name of Tesla is forgotten forever. And this is the route we're going. And all of these things are just increasingly making it impossible to communicate and to really understand what's going on. And this is part of what we're up against. So, and I'm trying to combat without much success. As you may notice, I don't use hertz, I use cycles per second because hertz is a person's name and cycles per second is what's going on. So the range of the Earth signal research is broken into a number of categories. It's either acoustic or it's electric. So if it's acoustic, then we're dealing with seismic transducers and audio type of phenomenon, or ELF subsonic vibrations, waves in the ocean, all the atmospheric waves that occur, pressure waves and all these things. That's all the acoustic aspect. The electric aspect is like the lightning and the Earth's magnetic field and signals from outer space and rock dynamics, creating, piezoelectric signals and all that. So basically, you're either operating acoustic or you're operating electric. Now, we can break that down further. We're either dealing with transverse waves or we're dealing with longitudinal waves. Now, this is, of course, for both acoustic and electric. So most people are familiar with the terms in seismic waves, the P wave and the S wave. The P wave is the longitudinal wave, and the S wave is the transverse wave. The longitudinal one doesn't really make any motion on the surface of the earth up and down. It's more goes back and forth. And the transverse wave is the one that you see, when the streets look like the surface of the ocean during a major earthquake. Now, further categorization is, are we dealing with a magnetic phenomena or are we dealing with a dielectric phenomena? So there's like electrostatic, electromagnetic, all these type of things. That's another categorization. And then the final categorization is it static, like the average value of the Earth's magnetic field or the voltage of the atmosphere in the course of a day or something like that, which doesn't really vary to any great extent? Or is it dynamic in that it's impulses and transients and waves and things that you look at on an oscilloscope? And again, in the general case, Earth signals are a composite of all of these things together as one dynamic. So going from there, so the actual receivers are a very difficult part of all this. It requires reception concepts that are unique, that are not generally available or understood. So the receiver in general is a configuration of amplifiers, oscillators, and modulators, and configured in such a manner that they're akin to the carrier telephone facilities of the Bell system, is why we rejuvenate these long lines out in the desert, why we use Bell system carrier telephone equipment to amplify or modulate the signals, and why the equipment under development is all based pretty much on Bell Telephone Laboratories design. So one of the biggest obstacles is the wide dynamic range required in receiving Earth signals. Obviously, from a fart on the moon to a lightning strike outside your house is a pretty wide dynamic range. In general, your reception dynamic range is 1 billion to 1. So that requires a lot of special considerations. When you're receiving ELF, you have to have a receiver that receives down to zero frequency or direct current. That receiver is not available and has to be basically made anew. So this is called the ultra heterodyne receiver. It's development taken from the top secret World War II efforts of Massachusetts Institute of Technology Radiation Laboratory. Its reception requirements were to receive radar impulses from aircraft and be able to, by manipulating the impulses coming back, to actually hear the propellers or the props on the aircraft so you could determine what type of aircraft they were. And believe me, that's one amazing receiver. So that information is generally available in the MIT Radiation Laboratory series, which covers most of this stuff. Now, another thing which I learned from RCA was multi-coordinate reception, which they referred to as diversity. So this allows you to receive these signals in stereo. So basically, you're receiving acoustic seismic signals, and you are modulating them into the voice frequency band so that you're capable of hearing these signals, which are otherwise inaudible. With the multi-coordinate reception or diversity reception on an XYZ coordinate axis, you will actually be able to sit within a set of speakers and be inside the earth and experience the dynamics of all of its physical and somewhat acoustic motions. So these are the basic types of receivers that that have to be developed and have been developed, and now it's just a matter of constructing this stuff and installing it. And in the case of audio amplifiers, is to possibly produce these as a commercial product of ultra low distortion amplifiers. So now, as far as the antennas go, or the receptors, they can be either magnetometers or electrostatic antenna, like elevated terminals, like used by Tesla or Marconi. These will give you warnings of pending seismic events. This is what Griffin's working on right now. So rather than the multi-coordinate seismograph, which is a voice frequency output so that the signals that you can't hear can be heard, is there will be basically the stereo or a musical magnetometer, which will definitely give at least an 18-hour warning of an impending earthquake in the local area. And then the electrostatic is a similar situation. Griffin has an electrostatic aerial, and that will be converted from ELF to voice frequency. And then you'll be able to hear the dynamics of the electrostatic field in the seismic forecasting area. So basically, my interest in all this began with the Integratron in Landers. That's how I ended up in Landers. Now, I'm not referring to the fraudulent Integratron as it stands today, but the real Integratron of the early days, just after the death of George Van Tassel, where myself and Don Lockwood had taken on the task of completing the Integratron, and the materials and the know-how was available to finish the first step. And one of the most evident applications of the Integratron in its primordial state of completion was the reception of Earth signals. And that's where I began this process. Now, the Integratron was taken away from us. It was not taken away from us by the men in black. It was taken away from us by the women in white, the people that of the past administration, which now everybody's well aware of their antics. I don't need to cover that any further. It's all very evident to everybody. So basically, I moved in with a deranged World War II vet named Walter DeRoche in a nearby property, and his whole life revolved around these type of things. And then jointly, him and myself proceeded to fulfill our dream, which was to build our own Navy base involving all of these exotic communications and sensing and all this type of stuff. And it resulted probably in the biggest electric wave research facility to ever exist in private hands. But that was taken away and destroyed. And after that point, even though there's a lot of video documentation and I learned a lot there, ultimately I'm starting all over again here without the resources of RCA or Bell Telephone or LA Department of Water and Power or the large assemblage of people I have to work on this stuff. So it's slower, but we are making progress. So I think that kind of wraps up the overview of what's going on here and how it relates to things that people have already heard of.
Okay, is there any other references or anything?
No, unless you have like any questions that come to your mind, things that you think are left kind of half said or.
Not really. It's
Okay.
kind of laser focused just on this one topic here. Those little receivers from McGreevy, I don't know if he's still making those or if those are available for anybody, but it does require one of those for somebody, you know, at the bare minimum in the simplest version, it requires one of those for the average person to be able to experience those on their own. Do you know of any other route that somebody could take in order to make one of those? I think he might have had some schematics, so, you know, from,
Oh, he's still, and he's got some other people working with him now on improving basically the physical form and the reliability and what have you. It's still basically the same type of receiver. It's not a receiver in this normal sense of receiver, in that there's no modulation process or oscillators involved. It strictly receives the voice frequency band directly. So it's a conventional audio amplifier with a very high sensitivity front end that responds electrostatically, and that allows it to pick up mostly lightning. You won't get any auroral signals unless you're up in the aurora. So it's now if you hook it to a larger antenna, like he had built one that fits in the radio rack on my car, and I can patch that into the 8-foot CB antenna, then the thing becomes much more responsive, because the body of the car acts as an electrostatic counterpoise to the 8-foot CB whip, and that will give kind of a good indication of any kind of pending seismic events or anything in the immediate area. But as far as long distance goes, it's not really. It won't get you this a lot of the signals. Now, this brings something to mind that I wanted to point out is, thus far, any efforts in all of this have been on a ham radio level. And if you try to go the other level, which is the academics, the only thing they care about is software and exotic theories. So basically, you got two sides of a valueless coin if you're trying to make any progress in this type of stuff, and both will be oppositional. So you will not get cooperation out of either side. So the thing that has come to mind that was brought up by your friend Yari, because he's from Finland, was, why not build a full-blown Navy-style receiving facility right up in the auroral zone, and then put that on the internet in stereo? Of course, it would be a massive expense, and it would take, you know, a considerable amount of engineering and cooperation. And I don't see where any of those things are available. But if we were to have a continuous, you know, publicly available auroral chorus operation going, that's what would be required. It would be a 3-axis magnetic loop antenna built with utility poles and 600 or 1200 pair telephone cables, kind of like the minesweeping coils on ships, and they would lock into the Earth's magnetic field and produce a 3-axis stereo representation. It's no real exotic engineering is required there as far as inventing anything or new technology. It's all pretty primitive. There's ultimately, you know, in today's world, everything is software orientated, and even the simplest function may use 100 million semiconductor junctions, which in this realm is actually rather senseless, because what you can do with 1 million semiconductor junctions, I can do with a handful of relays and vacuum tubes. So why play around with the software when you can just use the real stuff? But as you know, with the name Nikola Tesla and Elon Tesla, we're not going that route, and we won't go that route. So there's nothing we can do.
right. Well, I do want to mention on your website, I think I pulled it up in a screen share a minute ago. Here's a donate link on here. Everything Eric is talking about is supported by donations, with Eric and everybody who helps out with EPD Laboratories Inc. down in Tonopah, Nevada. It is a 501c3 nonprofit, and all the donations are tax deductible. So if you go to ericpdollar.com, click that donate link, you can click on PayPal. You can make a one-time donation of any amount that you like, or you can click on a box to have a recurring donation, maybe $10 a month or whatever you want. There is also a Bitcoin donation. I looked in the wallet, I don't know, several months ago for the first time in a long time, and there's only a couple $100 worth. But nevertheless, if somebody feels generous and wants to donate a whole Bitcoin to the operation anonymously, that would be greatly appreciated. And then for checks or money orders, these will come to my address here in Spokane at my PO box. And then I just endorse those checks and send them down to the bank in Nevada. And this is what basically funds the entire operation down there. It pays for insurance, property taxes, utilities, parts. It helps to pay for travel and food and lodging when a handful of people get together and work on some of these projects. So whatever you can donate is going to help move these causes, these projects along. Eric mentioned needing, roughly, I don't know, 10 to 15,000 or something for electrical out at the mine, but there's also money needed for the electrical work at the shop. So I guess, I don't know, new breaker box and, new conduit and outlets and all this can be installed at the shop there in right there in Tonopah, so that, different projects can be worked on different benches and so forth, because the outlets are kind of sparse and, instead of having to use extension cables and, it's just not the right way to do things. And so whatever money comes in, those are definitely going to these projects. And if you go to my YouTube channel, and if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, then you'll see when new videos are posted. But the last one before the VLF one was made public again for the first time in a long time. It's March 2nd, EPD live call with Eric Dollard, Griffin, and a handful of others. The little title there, it says listening to Earth's electrostatic signals. And so this is up in the shack. Is that what you're kind of giving a walkthrough on?
That's in the cable TV shack, and it's financially and technically feasible to have that on the internet by the end of summer. But the problem is trying to get people to come here and help me and all that. And I can't do all this stuff myself. So I don't know where we're going to go with that. But the materials are on hand. The system is basically designed. The antenna's up, which is 9,600 feet of wire formed into a 2-wire elevated capacity. The reception off that antenna is displayed in the no, the video actually is just the first loading section. So I don't believe it could have been the whole section. I don't remember. It's hard for me to keep track of the dates of the videos and what the progress is. But at any rate, we have the main, you would say, the backbone or the spine of the Alexanderson antenna is up to be used as an elevated capacity, and it's very, very, very good reception. It's has quite a bit of sensitivity. One thing that I learned from Steve McGreevy over his decades of receiving these signals is the problem that he's experiencing as time goes on. These signals are getting weaker and weaker and weaker and harder to receive. So consequently, you have to have larger and larger antennas to keep up. Originally, this project was conceived to use a 70-mile long O-carrier telephone facility, but unfortunately, that was ripped down, and so now we're starting from scratch all over again. We could never build anything like that, even though there is a 15-mile facility that we have our eye on. But when you get involved with something like that, because of the insurance and what have you, you'd have to have at least $250,000 in the bank account before AT&T and the government would even think of letting you get involved with that. So the question is why are their signals getting weaker and weaker? And it seems to be that Steve McGreevy and myself have concluded that the reason for this is because the sun is gradually going dead. Right now, we're at the peak of a solar cycle, and it's anything but a peak. Do not pay attention to the Chicken Littles on YouTube who come out screaming every couple of weeks with the biggest solar flare in history and the massive corona hole and and the sky's falling. None of that's happening. The sun is dead. It's so dead that it's not even worth paying attention to anymore. I've been studying this stuff on a daily basis since 1978, so I think I can speak with authority on the subject. And it was RCA who had been studying this stuff since 1928 provided me with the material to continue that research. So all of this is making it harder and harder to pick up any signals out of the earth with small devices or even moderate facilities. So it requires rather enormous structures. And as I pointed out, this aperture or wavelength consideration when you're trying to receive signals that have a wavelength from 100 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers, and an antenna has to be at least 1/10 of that wavelength. You need some rather massive facilities, either stretched out linearly, as in a series of utility poles and aerial conductors, or massive 2,400 pair telephone cables with all the pairs wired in series, in a giant loop between 40-foot utility poles. That Marconi learned early on that does alleviate the long wire, having this stuff stretched out for miles and miles and miles. But then again, that is another. If I was to hire the utility contractor that's available here to do that, that would probably be another $25,000-$30,000 project, just like getting the communications cable from the terminal facility at the mine in the town. That's $13,000, and we need that $13,000 before we can move ahead on any of that, but we don't have any $13,000. So that's the complication here. And also we need, like I say, $15,000 for the power company to finalize the power connection so that we can have all the receivers at the terminal facility at the mine to pick up the seismograph and the earth signals and whatever else that we've advanced to at that time, like the stereophonic ionospheric reception and quite a few other things that I've covered in numerous interviews and presentations in the past. But the bottom line is we are set to have this thing on what we have now on the internet by the end of summer. And it seems, unless somebody completely flakes out, that has claimed that they will help with this project in the summer. If everybody does as they said they would, we have the materials, we have the money to put it on the air, and that is the immediate objective. So at least there's something that'll be complete.
Okay. So again, check out ericpdollard.com. Go to the donate link. Pull that up real quick. Yeah, ericpdollard.com/donate. And most people donate by either PayPal. Once in a while, somebody will send a check. Any donation, no matter how large or small, is appreciated. And that does, as you can see, go towards the projects that's being discussed in these videos. And again, go to my YouTube channel. You can just put my first and last name in YouTube and it'll come up. I'd recommend subscribing to that so you can know when any new video is posted. And if you go back through all the videos on my channel, you'll see all these different interviews with Eric Dollard and the others who are participating and working with Eric in EPD labs. And you can see the different projects that these donations are funding. And so I think with that, we can probably wrap this one up. And so do you have any final words or?
No, I think that covers everything.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll be in touch. I'll talk to you later, Eric.
Okay, see you later. Bye.
Okay, see you later.